Hi, all you listeners. This is Robert Bingham, known as the Summoner. This is the podcast strictly out of the box. Remember,
Wake up.
wake up, smell the coffee, and know what time it is. Um, it's 1 minute to midnight. We have a guest on the show. Her name is Kienda Be True. I'm so sorry. We had a little technical difficulty earlier. Um, Kianda, she's a very lovely woman, very beautiful, and inside and out. And she's an author of many books. How are you, Kianda? And thank you for
I'm
being on
fine,
the show.
and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for
Great.
inviting me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Could you tell us about yourself, Kianda?
Yes, yes. How we get to where we are is always quite a saga when you have as many years as you and I have been working on.
Hmm.
Anyway, um, so my name is Kienda Betrue is my nom de plume, my writing name, my written name, and my last name is Valbracht. And um, let's see, to begin, I had a near death experience at birth. Um, very, but even before that, actually, it was how I died in my last lifetime that actually set the stage for this lifetime in a way. I died in the concentration camps in Auschwitz by cyanide, and cyanide does something that most deaths do not do. Cyanide not only damages the physical body, but it also damages and destroys the astral body. And if your astral body is destroyed, and there are only two things that will destroy that, and that is cyanide for one, and atomic radiation for two. That's the second thing. It One is not able to take the journey of the soul between death and rebirth in the same way if your astral body is destroyed, as opposed to being whole and carrying all your memories to be worked through in the afterlife. At any rate, so I came in a somewhat altered state very soon after I died. Many of us did, millions actually. Um, and since it was a difficult birth, I realized this is as crazy as when I left last time, and I'm not going to stay. So I held my breath and turned blue. However, um, once one reaches into the spiritual worlds, they have firm ideas about what is the real right thing for you to do in this lifetime. And although I argued, I did not win, and then I decided, oh, right, I will come again, I will do this. And ultimately, some of the things that I am. All right, so I came back, and some of the tasks that I'm taking on now were, I saw little harbingers of what could possibly be. Anyway, so I had a near death experience, but that made cracks between my worlds. I could see the fairies, I could see Jesus Christ, I could see Mary and the angels, and not all the time, but just in special moments or special aspects or particular moments, the whole other worlds would become clear to me. And then, of course, as we mature and as we go into our teenage years and all the difficulties that brings in the 20s, and um, that was all kind of on the back burner. But then at a certain point, I began to take on the destiny of this lifetime. And at that point, I began doing yoga and studying um, general spirituality, general theology, um, and began to develop, because I did not find enough of the meditation process sufficient for what I was needing and wanting in my particular life, I went rogue and began to develop my own meditative practices. Of course, they were always balanced in terms of being sacred geometry or verses and sayings from uh, famous people who were also very moral and correct, Rumi and all kinds of different people anyway. And then I found that actually my meditative practices were now taking me into those worlds that had been open to me as a child, in that I could now communicate with the elementals. I could actually speak with Christ. And I realized I can also ask questions, I can research. And now I consider myself a spiritual scientist, and I do spiritual research in other dimensions. There are so many new pieces of information, new ways of looking at old wisdom that we as humanity need to go clearly and consciously and well into a positive future, that I I chose to take that path. I know that many people are working on those aspects, and it's good, and the more the merrier in that case.
Oh yes.
Definitely.
I um I have my own near-death experience, and I'd like to share that. Um,
Wonderful.
I was very young. I was 17, and somebody told me they had this thing called cannabinol. When I heard the word cannabinol, I related it to tetrahydrocannabinol, which is THC. So I said, is this weed made into a powder form? And they told me yes, and so I took their word and I snorted it, and it killed me. Uh, I went to convulsions, and anyway, I died, and my spirit left to the ceiling of the room where I was at, and I looked down there, and I was blue, and I realized why they call it code blue. I was really blue, and with foam coming out of my mouth because of convulsions. And when I realized I was dead, that it wasn't a Hollywood movie, um, I shot to this place that was like a paradise. And there was a man there standing there waiting for me. And he had a white robe, and he was about 6'1" or 6'2". And he looked like Jesus, but I didn't say, oh, you're Jesus. I just I just heard him say, shut up, Robert, so I can talk to you. And I didn't realize I was talking, but then when I focused, I realized I was saying, I want to go back, I want to go back. And the reason why I kept saying I want to go back, because I realized that if it was a time was of the essence, that I couldn't be too long away from my body. And so I had to really make it urgent for him to send me back. And he said, well, why do you want to go back? And I told him that I was 17. I haven't really experienced anything, and I haven't had a family, and I didn't know I was going to die, by snorting that, I thought it was weed. And he told me, well, why do you want to go back? I go, because of that. And he asked me, why else do you want to go back, Robert? And I told him, because my mom's going to find out I'm dead right now, pretty soon. And I don't want her to find out. So he took me for a walk around in this garden where there was people walking around, but they were all silent. I couldn't hear them talk or anything. And him and I were talking about things, and I made agreements, like I'm gonna not do drugs anymore. I'm gonna do this and that. And I made some agreements, but I don't remember exactly the agreements I made. But I think being what I am is uh, out there in the UFO community, and bringing truth of what's going on. I think that was the agreement, and somehow it fitted into my life in a later age. Um, After he spoke to me, I went to. I realized that he sent me to a UFO, and in this UFO, there was a surgical table, and I was laying in it, and I just seen these wings and these hands coming all into my body, and I think they were repairing me to send me back. And after that, I woke up in the hospital, and I was alive. And when I woke up, my father and my brother were there, but they didn't tell my mom what had happened. Um, so that's my near-death experience. Just wanted to share that with everybody. Thank you.
Right. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a very amazing experience, a near-death experience, in that the we go from, in a way, from being cosmically provincial to knowing that there are other worlds, whole other worlds, and that we can be conscious in them and we can relate to them and in them. And that's a very good thing. As a matter of fact, I do believe that that is one of the aspects of our evolutionary next step, is that we become conscious and can work and relate consciously in these other vibratory planes of existence with the beings that reside there. And that we can then, we can learn many things, and we can make the world a better place. A
Of
place
course,
that's going
yes.
to survive in the best way, and save humanity from itself, hopefully.
But yeah,
That's what
that's the end game, is to save ourselves from ourselves, right?
right.
Especially with atomic weapons and stuff and pollution,
Oh my
all
gosh,
these things,
yes.
wars and everything. But
All these
we
things.
are gonna win, Kiana.
We are
We
what?
are we are gonna win this one.
Yes,
Yes, we are.
we will. We will. We've been at it a long time. We have many helpers, many beings, not only the angels and other spiritual beings who are of, say, earthly origin, like the ascended masters or other beings of that nature, but actually there are positive extraterrestrials who function in the same way that the angels do, actually. They would offer help, but they will not impose it upon us. We have but to be conscious and to be able to communicate with them and relate to them and ask for the help that we need. Then they have the permission to actually give what they can. But we need to be aware. We need to wake up. We need to smell the coffee. We need to know that it's time to do these things. It's not just, this is not just television. This is not just movies. This is not just entertainment. This is the reality of evolution of humanity, is
Exactly.
moving upward. One of the things that I actually took on early in my life was a cosmic conceptual matrix. Again, being cosmically provincial, being only influenced by the religions, the philosophies, the thinking, the cultures of Earth itself, and usually based on the material reality of things. Um, I wasn't able to find places to put all my experiences. And so I realized that the view that we have of life as a rule is not sufficiently large enough to bring in our experiences and put them in a relational situation with the whole vast array of where we are coming from, what's happening right now, and where are we going for the best possible outcome. And for that, we would need a conceptual matrix, which takes in not only physical earth and the physical material world, but also includes the etheric world or the life force world, the astral world or the emotional world, and the higher spiritual forces and the spiritual worlds. There are so many levels of beings in vibratory rates that ascend upward and downward, and each of those dimensions is what they are, actually have completely different laws than the ones preceding and succeeding them. Like the physical world, for instance. The physical world has the main law, shall we say, of the physical world is gravity. Everything that is physical is subject to gravity. But how do the trees get up? How do the trees get up off the ground? How do they overcome gravity? They're made of the same basic elements that all the stones are that just lie there. But how do they rise upward? They rise up because plants have not only a physical material body, but they have also an etheric body. And therefore, the plants in their patterns of uprisingness bring up, the silica and the nitrogen and the carbon and they bring all those things up due to the forces of the etheric world working in the plants. Animals and humans also do. We all have different. Humans are not just animals. We have a whole other different as the earth. The plants are from the stones, the plants from the animals to the humans. We have certain similarities in how we have created our bodies, but we did not come from them. And we have another whole aspect of ourselves, which is our consciousness of self, higher self, or what I like to call it is a chip off the old God block, a little spark of the divine that each of us is individually. Every human being is a species unto themselves. We are all humans, but we are all individual species, whereas in the animal world, they have a group soul. They don't have an individual consciousness, although they're developing it just as we're becoming more angelic. But they have their racial or their species characteristics are what gives them their formative forces in life. Anyway, so the conceptual matrix, which basically runs through all those aspects of the logical sequential timelines of the normal earth considerations, physical material things, what's happening in the evolution of the etheric body, what is happening in the astral body, in the soul bodies, in the mental capacities of humankind. These all have time frames as well. And there are spiritual beings, angels, archangels, and archai, who actually have, in a certain sense, the responsibility of assisting in these various aspects of humanity as it develops through time. So, conceptual matrix. One cannot stay cosmically provincial and create and work with a conceptual matrix because it's way too big and it includes everything. Creation, the whole world, the whole universe.
What I wanted to say is the divine design of the creation of all of this is just, like you said, just immense. And I guess we're going to be forever learning on all these subjects. I don't think it'll ever stop. We would ever stop learning from this. But I think of like, I think of this big giant Rubik's cube, and each box in the Rubik cubes is a, you know, it's got, and they move around and they do things, and it just continues. But that's the way I think about it. But go ahead, Kiandra, explain some more.
Right. I think it does have, it's definitely 3 or 4 or even 5-dimensional thing, the conceptual matrix. It's definitely not something you can just sort of draw on paper. It's a hologram of life, actually, is what it is. And we each are working to create that within ourselves, if that's what we've chosen to do. And I actually sometimes make the invitation that if anybody's working on pieces of this big puzzle of understanding where we came from, what we really are at right now, and how are we going to get into the positive future, then that would be wonderful. We all need to work together to create this. It's almost like another way of recreating the world, and it's with intentions. With intention and consciousness that we're going to create the new world into which we can now move with all our capacities, with all our abilities. And we're not a moment too soon either.
Exactly.
They've been encouraging us now for a very long time. And it's definitely time to step up, step in, do it. Do
Yes,
it.
it's by design, correct? It's all by design.
Yes.
It's like what I tell people sometimes, it's written in the stars,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak, destiny, divine destiny. And this is where we're going, and we're gonna win this one. Um, you're exactly right. We're all headed. What I get sometimes is I get that all roads lead to Rome,
Mm.
and it's like the rays of the sun. They shoot all the way, encompass 360, but they all lead to the sun, and
Mm-hmm.
that's our ascension is something like that. All of us are headed to where we're supposed to go, and we have people like you and myself and others that are guiding, so to speak, and making the people wake up. Um, and that's great. I'm glad you're doing your best, and we're all definitely trying to do our best well, it's not for fame or money. It's just for a quest that we have to do, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have the opportunity to share. That's really what it is. And we all have pieces of the puzzle, the great piece of existence, existential puzzle. And
Hmm.
in sharing with one another what our true feelings, our true experiences, our true thoughts, then we assist others in filling in pieces in their little puzzle, and they give us pieces in ours, until pretty soon we have a real understanding and experience of the unity within the absolute incredible multiplicity of existence, both being absolutely valid too. Yeah.
Yes. Can you tell
So
us
yes.
about?
Mhm.
Go ahead, Kiandra. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, I've been working on these kinds of things now for, let's see, 50 years probably.
Wow,
And so I have a
long time.
lot of writing, and I have a lot of research that I've actually done. As I say, considering myself a spiritual researcher, there is a lot of information, and now is the time to share, which is why I thank you very much and appreciate being here, because now is the time to speak of what we know. So I'm giving it my best go here.
Oh, you're doing a wonderful job. Um, can you tell us about the quartet?
Oh, the Dragon Quartet.
Yes.
Yes. Well, you see, we are at the time when humanity is making the quantum leap, the 100th monkey, or any of those kind of images of reaching the tipping point where actually um, there's enough, there's just enough for the inertia to be overcome and for the movement to continue. And we've barely reached that, and that is very, very good. I have had a personal experience of a metaphor for that quantum leap. And I can just say it in this terminology right now, which is the transformation of the reptilian brain stem to the dragon of higher consciousness. Now, we know the dragons of ancient China and ancient Tibet and that part of the world, where the dragon actually it was the dragon who worked through the Yellow Empress in order to bring culture, to bring music, to bring calligraphy, to bring weaving and pottery, and so many of the beautiful cultural things that humanity cherishes and fills the soul with joy. So it was the dragon that actually made that transformation. But there was also another reptilian who had intervened at some point in the proceedings, and that was the intervention by Lucifer, who was a snake or a dragon, but he was from another star. He was not a being of Earth. He was an extraterrestrial. It says in the Bible that he was from the morning star, which was not Venus at that time. It was back in the age of Lemuria, so it was ancient, ancient times, and even the stars were all different. The planets were different themselves. But anyway, long story.
Oh, sure.
So the transformation of the reptilian brainstem, which was Lucifer's hardwiring his own particular agenda into the physical body through the adrenaline system, the fight or flight, kill or be killed, the fear factor that arises out of any excessive or different, or any number of ways of describing it, sensory perceptions of things in the world. It's not like interest, or it's not just like, oh, it's just like, oh my gosh. And so that might have been useful when humanity was very, very primitive and perhaps dealing with saber-toothed tigers or large mammals that would eat them. However, in the 21st century, where there are millions of us, and we need not fear one another because there still is enough to go around, we need to transform that. Well, I will tell you how I came to that information, how I came to that conclusion.
Please do.
In my life, I have had what I call the call. And the call comes where it's a deep feeling that I know I must meditate because I'm going to be taken on a long journey, and I need to settle my body safely and securely and be free to go. So, and mostly they have been things when I was younger, and they had to do with earthly things. And so I was still what I would call cosmically provincial in not being able to see this larger picture at those times. But this time I wasn't aware that I was going to be called necessarily. I had gone to sleep, I thought. But I woke up in a little pod, in a small little space transport with a small gray wearing, and I really like this little bit. He was wearing an air flight jacket, one of the little leather jackets, you know.
Yeah.
I had never seen them and more. I had never seen even pictures of them. I had never seen them before. I had never seen pictures of them without just being in their little gray suits. But he had on this little jacket, and it looked very snazzy. At any rate, he had a very pleasant demeanor, and when he noticed that I was awake, he smiled at me. And so I smiled back, and then we just went on, and I looked forward, and oh my gosh, we are headed for a huge mothership, huge thing. And we came up to a little porthole that opened like a little aperture with a opens like so, and landed inside. And there were a set of stairs. We went up, and he opened the door for me. And we walked through and into a gray hall, and we walked down for a ways, and then a tall, very noble, regal gentleman was coming towards us. And when we met, the two of them spoke in another language. The little man smiled. We said goodbye. And the larger one introduced himself as Siridon from Sirius B, and that he is the project manager here on, I came to find out later, actually he was just introduced himself as a friend at that point. At any rate, he invited me in for tea, and then we went, after we had had our tea and a little conversation, and I need to say that it's not easy to remember what actually experiences in these other worlds, because we're not in the physical body. We do not have all the usual methods for remembering. We're in other dimensions, and our consciousness is now in the etheric or the astral rather than within the physical form. So I don't remember exactly what we said, but I do remember that I felt very secure and happy with it. So then, when we'd finished, he invited me to the healing room. So I said yes, gladly. And we went down the hall, turned the first hallway to the left when it teed, and the first door to the right. You put your hand by the door at the little signal, and then it opens like an aperture again, like what camera thing goes, and then it closed up. And inside was this beautiful oval room with a small pedestal inside that I lay down on, and Siridon put a little white sheet up over and covered me up and said, "Now you just enjoy." And he left, and when he left, the room began to move. The walls began to undulate, and colors just began to fill the whole room, crossing and like stained glass, but or like silks that you could see through. I think it was so beautiful, and music was sounding. Tones were being sounded, and it was glorious. So I fell right asleep, woke up the next morning in my own bed, peaceful, happy, energized, enthused for life.
Wow.
Well, that same experience occurred 4 or 5 times in the next maybe 2 or 3 years, where I would find myself being picked up. I would feel the call. I would be picked up by the little man and pretty much go through the same experience. Well, there was one day that I didn't get the call, and I felt so bad, and I really wanted to go to the healing room. So I decided I'll do it myself. I had been working, a short aside right now, I had been working on meditative practices that actually created astral projection machine, which is the Cadillac, actually, the Cadillac of astral projection machines. So I had done my meditations in the morning and had created the caddy, so it was available, which is always good. So I entered the hallway and went down to the end and turned to the left and went to the first door to the right and put my hand against the little sensor and opened, and I stepped inside and closed. Ooh, and it was not the healing room. It was the private quarters of some of the staff on the ship. It was 3 reptilians. And 2 of them lived in that room, and they had a friend with them. And one guy was sitting with his feet on his desk and his hands back behind his head, and he was just reminiscing about his partner. They had all been talking about their mates back home and how they missed them. But when I stepped in there, he finished his sentence and looked over at me, and they all 3 looked and went, oh, and I went, oh, put my hand on the thing and stepped back. Door opened, I stepped back quick and ran down the hall. Well, when I stopped moving fast down the hall, I noticed that there were portholes right along the wall. 2 of them, I think, in that place. So one was at my eye level, and I looked through, and there was a beautiful atrium, a huge, like many football fields, big atrium. I could see a small piece of the wall to the left, and I could see that there were like 10 or 15 or maybe even more stories that had little porthole windows like the one I was standing in. It was massive, and it was filled with the most beautiful trees. Amazing, elegant, lovely, many, many different kinds, things I'd never seen before. Animals like monkey things or squirrely things, or there were just amazing creatures there, and all kinds of different ones, and birds and butterflies. And I was just in awe. It was so looking there in a state of wonder, and I feel someone at my shoulder, and I look over, and it is Siridon. And he said, "Oh, my dear, you have startled some of our companions. Next time, you just tell us. Just call when you want to come. You don't have to just show up. Let us know." Anyway, so then we went for tea and then to the healing room, and all was well. So, well, that was very interesting, because here was a ship, and everything so far that I, in my rudimentary extraterrestrial experiences, had heard was that reptilians were not good. And here they were on the ship, and actually being very sweet, and friends of Siridon's, and he was a Leonine. And so my world began to expand and expand. And thank goodness I left my cosmic provinciality behind, and now could really open up to there's much, much more than I ever anticipated in this experience.
Okay.
Well, the next time I found myself on the ship, I did not wake up as I was being ferried there. I did not wake up and become conscious until I was lying on a bed in a huge room that had 1,000 people on beds. Human beings were all lying on a bed, and I was somewhere in the middle. And I look around, and everyone is sound asleep. I seem to be right now the only person who's sitting up and looking around and wondering what's going on. I noticed that in the far corner, starting way down there, 2 small grays were going to the head of every person. And they would do a little something, and then they would go on to the next one. They'd do something, and then they would go on. And I realized, they're going to eventually come to me, but I think I'll take a nap until they get here. So I did. Then I could feel, they're coming down my row. They're coming closer. They're right next to me. They were about to step to the head of my bed, and I sat up and looked at them and said, "What are you doing?" And they went, their poor dears. And then they ran away. Well, I just sat and waited to see what's going to happen next. Next, they came back with Siridon. And Siridon laughed at me again, and he said, "My dear, you have startled more of our friends." And I said, "Well, yes, but you know that because I am conscious and awake, you cannot do anything that I do not give permission for. And he said, of course we know that, and of course we would honor that at all times. Everyone here has given tacit approval, and everyone has okayed this. Now that you are awake, you must do so consciously. And I said, well, fine. What are they doing? And he closed his hands, and when he opened them, I could see inside his hand was a large golden egg that was warm and pulsating and just beautiful. And he said, we are inserting these into the alta major. The alta major is the chakra at the base of the spine, right at the atlas vertebrae. That's the one of the unacknowledged chakras, the alta major. And I said, oh, that's interesting. What's in the egg? And he closed his hands again. And when he opened them, I could see inside the egg. It was now transparent to my sight. And inside was curled up a sweet, milky white, pearly, beautiful, sleeping, baby white dragon. And I loved it immediately. And I looked at Cyrodiil and I said, why are they doing this? And he closed his hands again. And this time when he opened it, there was not an egg or anything like that. There was a galaxy. A whole galactic system was in his hand. And I looked deep in and I fell in, and I fell all the way down in through the galaxies to Sirius B. Sirius, the trinary star system. Anyway, this was a long time ago when actually I saw the whole history of Sirius B, that they also had been on an evolutionary track such as humanity had been, but there had been an intervention very similar to the intervention in human evolution when Lucifer stepped in. The intervention that had occurred in Sirius B was also a difficulty for the people and actually resulted ultimately in the destruction of the surface of their planet, and they now live underground, all of them. But at any rate, the Christ-like being, as we had Christ, who came to overcome and overturn the intervention of Lucifer, in Sirius B, there was a Christ-like figure who was to overturn the intervention of their people. And that Christ being was a female white dragon. When I saw this whole history unroll before my eyes, I called upon the Christ and I asked, is this true? And Christ smiled at me and said, yes, the white dragon is my cousin. We are all beings of the same spiritual dimension in this galaxy. At that point, I opened my eyes and looked at Cyrodiil and smiled and said, okay. And I lay down, and the two little grays came and inserted that egg into my alta major. And I went to sleep. And I woke up in the morning and I could check in and see, oh yes, there's a beautiful golden egg there. Oh yes. And it took me 3 years to incubate that egg. At about 2 years, one day I was in the bathtub taking a nice hot bubbly bath, and all of a sudden I feel this very amazing feeling at the back of my skull, and I hear a crack, And I quick look inside, close my eyes on this side and open them on the other side. And oh my gosh, there is a crack and there's something in there. And then for the next whole year, this little crack got wider and wider, and I could see them little eyes looking out. And then one day the top popped off, and a little dragon was just sitting with his little hands over the edge, just looking out at me. We loved one another. So it wasn't until many years later that actually I one more fact about myself that I haven't told, and that is my infant son died at 1 year on the day of his christening anniversary, which was 1 month after and 1 year after he died. I mean, after he was born. And that month between his birth and his death has always been a time when I would go off and meditate and I would do inner work. It was always a time that the thresholds and the veils between the worlds were very thin. Well, this year, the 3rd year that I'm incubating my egg, my dragon's egg, I was on retreat. I was greeting the sun as it came over Mount Diablo in Southern California. And all of a sudden, there was a huge and incredible whoosh. And the dragon, tall and beautiful, white with turquoise blue eyes, flew out and came and stood before me. And we bonded, and she said, "Let us go and tell Siridon." So we, hand in hand, we moved and went up to the great ship one more time. And we went in, and this time I thought we were going into Siridon's room. Haha. And I said, okay, this is where we always have tea. So I thought we would knock on the doors. It opened. We stepped in. It was not Siridon's tea room. It was a huge amphitheater. A massive amphitheater that looked some beings of all kinds and amazing, strange sorts. Things that I had never heard of or thought of. And only, and I have to say this now, only later, many years later, I was reading the Native American tarot cards that were by Jamie Sams, and on the card of the North Shield, she goes on a journey to the star elders, and she describes a number of different species of star elders that she saw. I saw the same. And it was beautiful. It's wonderful to have affirmation of these things, because it's not easy to affirm such things as I'm telling you now. But the cards did that. So there they were, and they actually rose and gave us a standing ovation, because this implanting of the egg, of the transformation of the reptilian brainstem to the higher consciousness of the dragon of grace and beauty and culture and largesse and generosity, that is being offered to everyone. On the ship, Siridon is the head of the project Redemption of Lucifer. So we were not the first pair. No, she wasn't the first egg to have been hatched, but we were one of the few in the first ones where actually we were both conscious during the whole process, and that's why they gave us the standing ovation. Well, Christ and the white dragon from Sirius B and were waiting for us, and Siridon were waiting for us at the side, and then we went and had a great convocation with those. So it was clear to me that every human being, or almost every human being, had this done, that humanity had made the tacit agreement, and that through an agreement with the reptilian races who had evolved far beyond what Lucifer had done long ago and wanted to redeem the acts of their forebearer, Lucifer himself, had agreed that this project should go on, that now there needed to be another intervention, but of a higher and a pure and a true nature. Therefore, we no longer have to have the fight or flight, kill or be killed response. We, through incubating our dragon, as it were, the work of Bruce Lipton and Candace Pert, two quantum biologists, have actually given us the keys in how to transform the reptilian brainstem to the higher consciousness. And what that is it is our task to flood our bodies with endorphins and to basically starve the cells of adrenaline. Therefore, if we meditate in the mornings and we meditate at noon, or we sing, or we are happy, or we do gracious, gentle things in the world, we are incubating our consciousness into the next higher level. So this is one of the chapters of the Dragon Quartet, is this story that I have told.
I'd just like to share that I've met a couple of reptilians in my journey. I'd like to share that.
Oh, yes.
I was at my mom's and dad's house, and I was sleeping in one of the bedrooms, and I seen a translucent reptilian next to this wall. He was translucent, but he was wearing a lab coat. I mean, I could see him, but I could see through him at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
He was very muscular. He had a clipboard, just like a doctor. And he came and he was observing me, and he was writing down things. And as if he was a doctor, one of our doctors. And showed no anything that other than he was just observing and writing. And that was the first time I've seen a reptilian. The other time I videoed a ship that was flying, and it was doing a 360 as it was flying. And I took a long video of it, but then I took it to the desktop computer, and I clipped certain parts of the ship, and then I blew them up, and there was a couple of reptilians looking at me. It was like the whole ship was a Skype. And they were the ship looking at me, but I couldn't tell that as I was filming, only after I took it to my monitor and observed it. So when people say a lot of things about reptilians, I really can't say anything bad about them, except because they haven't done anything bad to me. And so they're there. So, other than that, they're very technical and everything. But that's my two experiences with the reptilians.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, I have since met the three staff members on the ship, and I call them A, B, and C, which is A, B, and C. I never got their names, but they're fine with that. I've met them since, actually, and I realized in that regard that reptilians, there are many, many different actual races or different kinds of reptilians. And so you can't say anything about all of them any more than you can say anything about humanity. You
Exactly.
know, we have good people, we have not so good people, we have fabulous people, and it's a mixed bag, and it's a mixed bag out there too.
Right.
Even the white royals, actually. Um, just as an aside on that, um, the year 2016, when Edgar Mitchell died, I met Edgar the second day after he died. I am a medium also, and so I go into the spiritual worlds to observe those that have died. And I just observe. I don't, unless there's something specific that I am asked to do, but I observe. I don't bring back messages necessarily or anything. But friend of mine called and said, Edgar died, would you please just look in on him? So I did. I just looked in on him. And as I was standing there looking in on him and noticing that he was talking to, you know, Neil Armstrong and Christy McAuliffe, people who were in his world who had died before him, there were also a number of extraterrestrials there. And I'm just watching all this, and he happens to look over and sees me there, and he comes over and says, well, what are you doing here? So I said, well, my friend asked me to check in on you, so I'm just checking in. How are you doing? Looks like you're doing fine. And that was kind of started the conversation. So we carried on, and in the end, he invited me to join the party. I travel with not just myself, but I actually travel with quite a large group of, I call them my posse, my cosmic posse, a number of people and spirits and beings and guides and whatever all else. And he said, yeah, you've got quite a group here, so why don't your party join my party? And so for a whole year, I joined Edgar and what I call the interstellar team, which is made up of his extraterrestrial friends and mine. And at one point, we had a very serious experience with the white royals. And that is something that they definitely are ones who are working as a whole negatively on the earth. But even that is changing. Even that is changing. Everything must be redeemed. And that's why, back to the conceptual matrix, we need to know where we have come from and where we are going, because there are many, many like us, many ahead of us, many behind us, but we are all headed in the same direction. And if we know that and we can actually assist one another, and we actually have the responsibility to redeem some because of what we have already done. Anyway, there's a lot more that will be coming out about the white royals.
Wow. That's fantastic. Very, very fantastic. You just took me on a journey. Um, I think that's all about what we have time for, but we have 10 minutes left. So can you let the listeners know where your website, where they can order your book or things like that, and the number of books that you have that they might be interested?
I will. Well, in terms of my books, I only have one that is published, and you can even get that on Amazon, or you can download it for a donation off of my website. I have two websites. The first one is www.cosmicodyssey.info. MICODYSSEY.info. And that has over 300 pages of a blog that the year 2016 of all the experiences with Edgar and the interstellar team. And one of the things that has arisen out of that work that we did is we would like to have many people who work on both sides of the threshold in the spiritual worlds with the extraterrestrials and spiritual beings as well. would like to have a gathering of human beings who do the same, because, and who have relationships with extra races and species. We call it the Interstellar Civil Summit, because we know that we cannot at this time trust our government and the extraterrestrials that they are in basically cahoots with, because they do not have Earth for humankind as their goal. There are other alternative motives and goals that various beings have. But we humans, people who are still in the humankind level of being, we want Earth for humankind. And we need to be able to put our 2 cents into when the Galactic Federation has its gatherings, when the High Council has its gatherings. There need to be people who are working with extraterrestrials who can come and add the human level awareness, consciousness, and aspects to that. So, and since I'm one of those people who has been to other planetary systems, I've observed all kinds of amazing astronomical things, and actually watching them come true on the science of the world now. I'm putting out the call for that. Anyway, so so that's one website. And then the other website is www.kiendabetrue.com. That's KIendaBetrue.com. And what that is most of them are in monographs, I call them. They're hard to call books because some of them are very small. They're very intense and they're very dense, but they're small. So the Dragon Quartet can be downloaded. Even Lucid Death, Conscious Journeys Beyond the Threshold, can also be downloaded from there. But you can get that on Amazon if you so desire. There's just a number of monographs on the Cosmic Christ, the deeds of the Cosmic Christ, the elementals, radiation, the world situation, the human situation. Some more here. Just a lot of information that I've written up and made ready for presentation from my many years of spiritual research. And the other book that I'm working on right now is, and I feel we need to know our history so that we do not repeat it in this case, and so we know what the forces are that are in opposition to human evolution on the earth itself. And that is the devolution of evil from the Julio-Claudian emperors to the Third Reich and beyond, actually, coming into the present. In having read the Akashic records, in having read the incarnation trains of these people, these entelechies, which is the part that reincarnates over and over again, from the Julio-Claudian emperors to the Third Reich, was quite an arduous experience, but it's very, we must know what our opposition is. We must remain in joy and in peace and in, I won't say innocence, because I don't know if that's possible anymore. Ignorance, no. Innocence, possibly. But we must remain aware, conscious of all factors, and still choose joy, still choose love, still choose consciously to remain positive. But we need to know the opposition. so that we are not beguiled, or we do not fall prey, or we do not go to sleep. Any number of things. Anyway, that's what that's all about. But basically, the information that comes through all the extraterrestrial explorations and the spiritual research all leads to the time of our evolution is now.
Yes,
And we
yes,
have
it
but
is.
to be strong and step up.
Well, thank you, Kianda, and thank you for all the, excuse me, all the hard work that you put in, and all the information you're giving to the world. And this is one of the books. It's called Lucid Death, Kianda's Kienda Betrue. You can see it there. And you can order it on Amazon. Kianda, well, thank you so much. When you took me on a journey right now, and I really loved everything you had to say.
Good. Thank
Hopefully
you.
we could, not hopefully, but we will have you again as a guest on here. And
Thank you.
thank you.
Ciao.
My heart goes out to you.
Thank you.